Is it just me, or have the improvements and updates to camera gear recently started becoming less and less exciting? The other day, the embargo lifted for the videos related to the release of the new Panasonic Lumix S9, and I watched a bunch of those videos, not because I'm planning on buying the camera, but because I just like being in the loop with what's being released. And when we set aside the overly sensationalized titles and thumbnails like, is this game-changing camera gonna change the camera game? Or this is almost the perfect camera. But when you actually watch through a lot of those reviews from different creators, you're gonna come to the conclusion that the S9 is a good camera, but it's like nothing revolutionary. It's just fine. It's supposed to be like a cheaper and more compact version of the Lumix S5 II, and the S5 II is a great camera according to a lot of people, but from what I've seen in the comments, apparently the S9 is missing a lot of the features that actually make the S5 II a great camera. And then from what people are saying, they have added a few new features that seem more like a marketing gimmick than something that's actually going to be practically useful in the long run. But tech-wise, it doesn't introduce anything new that hasn't already existed before. But this isn't just like a video that's gonna be hating on the Lumix S9. I kind of feel like that's the case for most modern-day camera gear releases. Like, they add new stuff, but it's almost never anything that's like crazy or revolutionary. And with every new gear release, you're gonna see a bunch of creators making review videos, which is fine. I'm not one of those people that's gonna sit there and moan about, oh, there's too many gear videos, people aren't creating enough. But I'm also not gonna pretend that in a lot of those, they don't try to spin those new but ultimately insignificant features as something that the general public should care about. But like, at a certain point, I feel like it's pretty much obvious for everyone that a lot of those improvements are much more incremental and appeal to a much more niche audience than anything before. Not too long ago, most cameras could only film in 4K 30 FPS, and 4K 60 was considered to be like a more premium feature that was only available in more higher end cameras that you would have to pay more money for. But it didn't take long for camera brands to start including 4K 60 into even more budget oriented cameras, and then 4K 120 became the new premium feature that everybody was looking for. But soon after, that also started getting added to cheaper cameras. And at this point, I haven't really seen anybody caring about like 4K 240 FPS being in cameras. Why is that? Did we get to a point where we could all collectively agree that that's a feature that most people wouldn't care about, so it just doesn't make sense to add it? And kind of the same thing goes for stuff like camera sensors. Before, brands would improve dynamic range, low light performance, color science, but now it feels like we're at a point where none of those things can really be improved that much more to where it would matter in the real world. Like, the FX30 can already almost shoot in pitch black, so what are they gonna improve on that? Are they gonna let me shoot in pitch black plus? And the same goes with color science. Most modern day cameras released in the last 4 or 5 years have colors that are absolutely fine. And there's always going to be people that bitch and whine about that not being the case, but they're just wrong. Same goes for the dynamic range of sensors. You're not going to expect to have RE dynamic range in something like an FX30, but the people buying an FX30 understand that. For stuff like gimbals, it's higher payloads and stronger motors that supposedly offer a smoother experience. But all of those changes are so incremental that you barely notice them. If you need a gimbal for a heavy camera, those have already existed, and the newer ones aren't that much different. So I know that people complain about there being too many gear-focused videos that all say the same stuff. And I kind of agree, but I also feel like all of the stuff I just talked about sort of contributes to that. There's just less and less to be excited about when it comes to camera gear. Like, a few months ago, I picked up the Sony FX30, and I kept telling people that it's gonna be the last personal camera that I'm gonna buy for a really, really long time. And that's because I didn't think that anything revolutionary and significantly different would come out anytime soon. And I completely stand by that statement. There are obviously cameras that are much better spec-wise, but for my use cases and for me personally, the Sony FX30 is a perfect camera right now. Plus, if I need any other camera for a one-off project, I can just rent it. And honestly, nowadays, I care way less about the specs of cameras on paper than I do about the ease of use. If you give me a semi-modern camera, I'll care about stuff like battery life, ergonomics, rigging options, or how easy it is to use without having to rig it out. So right now, I just kind of feel like we live in a time where significant camera improvements have started slowing down to the point where I feel like people really need to shift their focus in terms of what they care about with the new gear that's being released. But yeah, that's just something that I've had on my mind lately, and I'd like to hear what you think. Do you agree that camera gear improvements are slowing down? What do you look out for when something new is about to be released? And just in general, what do you care about when it comes to gear? I'm interested to hear what you have to say about the topic. But yeah, I think that is about it for this one. Later.